Today I want to talk about people who oppose social justice warriors as well as right-wingers in general. To put it simply, they have some problems that seem to have been getting worse recently. From burying themselves in apologies and disclaimers to overused arguments and the assumption of guaranteed support. Let's start with the apologies. To put it simply, I've noticed a trend of anti-SJWs putting apologies and disclaimers in their arguments. Don't do that. The most common version is to say, "I'm sorry, but," and then get to the point. I know this is often added sarcastically, but it also seems genuine at times. I'm reminded of the early days of Anita Sarkeesian's attack on gaming. Apologies, or even admitting that one or two games could be interpreted as problematic, were used as admissions of guilt, and thus justification for tearing everything down. It seems that people have forgotten that. Another thing I see is popular vloggers and pundits filling their videos with disclaimers about how their opinions aren't harassment and how their audience shouldn't contact or threaten the people they are criticising. Once again, this comes across as an admission of guilt and validates the lie that SJWs receive harassment and death threats. Remember, they have yet to provide any proof of any harassment despite almost 6 years of supposedly being inundated with the stuff. I'm reminded of something that happened in the furry fandom. See, the furry fandom has a bad reputation, but most of the cliches about furries come from a couple of old sources. Those being a Vanity Fair article from 2001 and an episode of CSI from 2003. That's 15 years ago and their reputation has never fully recovered. The fandom has tried various things to repair the damage. Denying the press and media access to their conventions didn't work, as not only did it make it look like they were trying to hide something, but it allowed said press and media to make up whatever nonsense they wanted. Denial also didn't work. The reason being is that if you deny something, that still creates a connection in somebody's mind. For example, if a stereotype Hells Angel biker type comes up to you saying, "We're not criminals, only 5% of us have broken the law, and all that stuff about shooting people and dealing drugs is overblown," chances are you're not going to believe him, and even if you do, you still have a mental connection between biker and violent crime. So what did help the furries repair some of the damage? Focusing on the positive and either playing dumb or making a joke if pressed. We could speculate as to why this works, but going by the same logic as the biker example, by focusing on the positive, people started to associate furry with their favourite childhood cartoons and films. It turns out, guy that likes Zootopia and Garfield is much more likeable than sexual deviant with something to hide. So stop apologising, stop filling your arguments with disclaimers or qualifiers, because those will be used as an admission of guilt and just look bad. Another thing I'm not a fan of is the overuse of the term projection, as well as accusations as to SJW's motives. If you've somehow never heard of the term, projection is the idea that bad people will accuse others of bad behaviour they themselves are guilty of. The most well-known example of this is anti-gay, traditional family values politicians being caught in gay nightclubs sniffing cocaine off a twink's penis. In social justice, it's fairly common for male feminists to accuse people of being sexist or rape apologists. It's also not uncommon for high-profile male feminists to be accused of sexual assault. Sargon of Akkad did a video listing a lot of these cases, and given that video is more than half an hour long, it's pretty clear that the accusation of projection was fairly valid. However, I do wonder if anti-SJWs are also guilty of projection. It's hard to think of a good example, but a simple one is the claim that people just want games and media to be free from forced diversity bullshit, and that's an argument I agree with, and I know others do too. But sometimes I see ideas for what this politically neutral media should be like, and it's exactly the same crap as the SJWs, just flipped to match their politics. Look at Vox Day's comic and you'll see it's just as cringy as the forced diversity nonsense it's supposed to be accounted to. Now imagine that applied to all the insults and accusations that anti-SJWs frequently throw around. Obviously not everyone is guilty of every accusation, but you see where I'm coming from, right? Not only that, but these accusations and insults are overused. I know left-wing people, and the ones I know aren't trying to rape women or kill all white men or start a neo-Marxist state or whatever else you're accusing them of. They just disagree on some political issues and how to fix them. While I'm criticising anti-SJWs, I want to debunk the claim that the next generation is the most conservative generation in decades. I don't think that's true. The reason being is that assumes that people are born, or at least raised, with some kind of default support for a political party or cause. It also assumes that they will support a certain political group regardless of what they say or do. There's an American and Canadian term called team politics. The concept assumes that instead of voting based on policy, philosophy or competence, people will choose a political party arbitrarily and support them blindly and forever as they would a sports team. And yet, despite the political upsets that were Donald Trump and Brexit, politicians still seem to believe that they are guaranteed to win simply for being on the right team. I vaguely remember the Tory party, post-Brexit, putting out a crazy manifesto that lost them a fair bit of support. That kind of behaviour makes no sense unless you believe in team politics. So no, I don't think the current or next generation is somehow more conservative than previous generations. It's that the left-wing politicians say and do such crazy things that almost no sane person is going to vote for them. As a friend of mine said, there are two kinds of people, those that want to be left alone and those that won't leave them alone. If right-wing politicians and pundits believe that they can say or do whatever they like because Generation Z or whatever they're being called this week will vote for them regardless, then they're going to get a serious slap in the face come election day. This criticism also applies to right-wingers in general. The belief that right-wing politics is going to take over, that the pendulum is swinging the other way, again no. Just like the politicians and pundits, if you assume that whatever idiotic backwards beliefs you have are going to be accepted simply because they are the opposite of social justice, you're a fool. Let's look at games. In the late 90s and early 2000s, traditionalists tried to claim that violent games would turn people into killers. They had support of the old media, but were ultimately laughed out of the room. In the 2010s, feminists tried to claim that sexual content in games would turn people into misogynists. They had the support of the mainstream media, but were ultimately laughed out of the room. How do you think your campaign to get games you don't approve of banned is going to go? Here's a hint, you're going to get laughed out the room! I get the feeling that there's something I'm forgetting, but it probably wasn't that important. The point is, people who are anti-social justice are messing up and are falling back into old habits by filling their arguments with apologies and disclaimers. I think they are overusing arguments like projection and assuming people's motivations, and the belief that the right wing can do no wrong or will have guaranteed public support simply for not being social justice is stupid. Thanks for watching. Bye!